No buyers, a street scene. This is a continuation of the analysis that we did in class on Wednesday. So we finished at the end of stanza 1. So moving on to stanza 2. In stanza 2, Hardy is describing how the pony that the old man and the woman have is not physically strong enough to steer the disjointed wagon straight. So, as a consequence, the wagon wiggles left and right in a rambling line. The fact that the pony is old and weak adds to our feeling of sympathy to the man and the woman. Not only are they old, not only are they having to sell their wares, their merchandise on the street, but they also have an old pony who is not physically strong enough to do its work for them. And this just adds to the sad feeling that we have for the two characters in here, and probably how poor they are. In the last line of this stanza, Hardy also writes that it is the wagon that is pushing the pony, and not the pony that is pulling the wagon along the street. Pushing the pony is an example of alliteration. We have the P and the P here, pushing the pony. It's an explosive letter, the letter P. And Thomas Hardy has chosen to use the P as alliteration on purpose because it emphasizes the effort needed by the wagon to move the pony along as it is so old. The pushing the pony almost sounds like the wagon is pushing the pony along. The language that Hardy has used in this stanza is particularly effective because it suggests that it is in fact the wagon which owns the man, the wife, and their pony. It is not the man and the wife that owns the wagon. The wagon is being almost personified here. The wagon has the power. The wagon is the one which carries their livelihood, what they're selling, how they're making their money. The wagon is the one that's in control, and it determines their path and their movements, and not vice versa. It's not the man and the wife and the pony which is determining the path that the wagon takes. It is the wagon. So, does this poem show that it is them who are enslaved to the wagon and the entire load it carries? Maybe. The man and his wife depend on the money from selling their merchandise, their items. Without selling these items, these merchandise, they cannot survive. So they are enslaved to this wagon. The wagon has made slaves of them. Moving on to stanza 3. This stanza is really quite important, and you'll see from how many slides we have that there is a lot of analysis to do in here. So Hardy describes the woman in relation to her husband. And this can be seen in the first 2 lines of the stanza. The woman walks on the pavement verge, parallel to the man. Not next to him, but parallel to him. Hardy purposefully leaves a gap between the 2 lines. So he doesn't continue this line on this line. He makes them separate lines. And he might do this to show the physical gap and the emotional gap between the woman and her husband as they walk along the street. And perhaps also, like I said, to convey to the reader, to us, their emotional distance from each other as well. At no moment in this poem does Hardy make it clear how the old couple feel about each other. he leaves it to the reader to infer, doing things like this, leaving this gap between the line. We can infer how she feels about him. So after reading the first 2 lines of stanza 3, it shows that the woman has perhaps lost all emotion and feelings that she once felt for her husband. The shortness of the line parallel to the man might suggest that the words and the emotions that once would have filled the space on this line no longer exist. So you might be able to link that to neutral tones, in which the relationship has also died. Maybe this relationship has also died, but they still need one another to continue with their life, to make money. They depend on each other to survive. Continuing on through this stanza, Hardy writes about the woman's appearance. She wears an apron. The rain clamps her apron till it clings. However, the woman's portrayal in the poem is not directly described. Hardy does not describe what the woman looks like. He leaves the reader to infer about her. We only see a description of her via her apron, white and wide in span. The word apron here is effective because it is associated with work. We wear aprons to work in the kitchen. We wear aprons to work on jobs that are dirty to protect our clothes. And she is wearing an apron because she is working. And as the apron is wide in span, the reader can infer that she's probably overweight. She's wide. Her apron is wide because she is wide. Hardy also writes that she carries a like Turk's head, but more in nursing wise. So it's almost like she's cradling a child in her arms. The man is swinging the Turk's head like a drum major in the first stanza, but she is cradling the cleaning brush that she's trying to sell like it's a child. Hardy includes this to generate sympathy for the woman. She treats the object she is trying to sell as her children. Maybe we could question that she might not have had children, she might not have had a family of her own, so she's treating her merchandise like her family. This definitely generates sympathy. We can empathize with the character in this poem. And she's also described as if her thoughts were on distant things, which further emphasizes that she longs for a different and better life to the one she has now. She's almost imprisoned in this life with her husband, who she might not love anymore, and she's imprisoned with selling this merchandise because this is her livelihood. This is the only way she can survive. But her thoughts were on distant things. The last 2 lines of this stanza, so, step by step, they move with their merchandise, and nobody buys, suggest that the man and his wife are dictated to by their merchandise. The merchandise that they sell, as they can only move forward in their lives by selling items. If nobody buys their merchandise, they go home with no money. So it's the merchandise that rules and controls their life and has power over them. And you can see, like in stanza 2, when I mentioned about the merchandise dictating them. This is another example. The use of the enjambment between the two lines of the final two lines of stanza 3 fully isolates the line "and nobody buys." This is effective because it emphasizes the words "and nobody buys." The reader focuses on these three words and the idea that they are having a really hard life. They are selling this merchandise, which probably isn't of very good quality, and nobody is buying it. They're going to go home with no money. And Thomas Hardy wants us to focus on that fact. If "and nobody buys" was with as part of another line, then that effect wouldn't be there. Nobody buys, so the couple and their pony have to trek onwards in their miserable lives until they do sell their merchandise, or at least some of it, because they need to make some money to go and buy some food. So, what does make their situation so moving? Two things that you should focus on: the poverty and the hardship that we can see in this poem, and the hopelessness and the futility. If you go back to Drummer Hodge to remind yourself of what futility means, it means the pointlessness of life. The futility in their situation is that they have this merchandise, probably of not very good quality, and they cannot sell it. And that is futile.